This is Joseph Anderson's week, and God, I've been waiting a long time for this because, frankly, the only way to get him to call you back is to promise him an international audience.
Okay.
So do me a favor on Premium, if you can figure out how to log in again, send me a link to your LinkedIn because I can't find you online.
Oh, because I'm pretty busy, so I don't really go to LinkedIn. I have an account from many years ago, but I never go there because it's just
Okay, well,
consume too much time.
send me something that I can share with folks. There's also a place where you can introduce yourself so the other folks get to know you and how to get in touch with you, okay?
Okay.
Great. All right, with that, I'm going to disperse this great crowd, and I am going to have us focus our attention on Mr. Joseph Anderson. So, bye, Jose. Goodbye, Luke. John Richard. Mr. Harris. Mr. Sun. And now we're left with MDG Premium's favorite son, Joseph Anderson. Say hi to the nice people, Joseph.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
You are a friend that I made back in the ill-fated MDTX days, back when I attempted to merge the 10X Medical Device Conference with the heft of a $2 billion company that wanted to change everything and make it all about selling shit. That wasn't a good fit. But look at us. We wouldn't have even met it had not been for that. You know, there's a, everything happens for a reason is what they tell you when things really suck. Maybe the whole reason MDTX happened was our bromance.
Maybe. It wasn't too bad, right? I mean,
for those of you who don't know, Joe gave a much applauded presentation at 10X last year. And it was about quality, which is what he does for a living. And he started with a very personal story about his elder child. And if you would just give us the highlights for those, I see some names here that probably haven't seen the video. So what happened?
Yeah, my son was born with some physical and genetic defects, and part of his time in the NICU unit, there were some quality issues and some process issues where an adult feeding tube was placed down or attempted to be placed down his throat, and because of that, it's caused him long-term speech impediment issues. So the short of it is, because of poor processes and poor part control and controlling parts by revision instead of number, it was almost impossible to see by the eye for the part sorters the difference between a child and an adult tube. And because you try to stick an adult tube down a child's throat, a newborn's throat, bad things happen. So he's had a lot of damage internally because of that, and but he's thriving now. He is an 11-year-old boy. So the good sign is a lot of great doctors and a lot of great products since then have helped him thrive as a little boy. But early on, it's fairly stressful.
Did Saya's situation make you take stock of your life and change your life's work to become a process quality guy? Was it that event?
No, I always have been. I started as an apprentice in the automotive industry when I was 16 years old, so a long time ago. And I have always been in the global process and global system kind of arena and demographic. Went through a lot of training, and it just made sense to me. And quality's always been a passion of mine, not just for products, but also the workforce and the things we do. It's probably how I was raised by my grandparents, do it right the first time. Mm-hmm. And, I would say Josiah's incident fire, for those of you that see me speak, and Joe knows me well, it's a passion of mine now. I would say before then, it was just kind of a pet peeve and something I was good at. 2009, when my son was born, it became a passion, and it kind of became a mantra. So the fail fast, fix it fast mentality that's been going around the last 4 years is something that annoys me, to be honest. I think the only companies that can afford to do that are the ones that have billions and billions of dollars to fail over and over again and pay fines across the industry.
Let me ask you about that. I'm familiar with that adage or concept that if you're going to fail fast so you can move on to the next thing. And you're saying you have a problem with that idea.
Yeah,
it seems like an efficient thought to me. Like if I'm going to try to build, we have some developers on the call. If I'm developing something, I want to see that it's not going to work right away so I can move on to the next project. You're not saying that though, are you?
No, it's failing fast and fixing it once, fine. That's great. Like if you get to the design, you produce it, you realize we didn't quite hit the mark, especially in the proto side or development side of a product or a process or a service, no big deal, right? Because then you just make rapid iterations. But what I'm talking about, and this is what we see today with quality escapes, is that mentality has gotten used incorrectly. And I'm being nice. I'll let Joe be not nice. But what happens is this mentality of we're going to fail fast on everything we do. Well, that means your product and your design's out of control. And that means you fail fast all the way into start of production. And during production, you find other issues because you didn't take your time to review the design properly. You don't have the right processes to support it. So you're releasing poor product in your manufacturing and you're trying to catch all those quality escapes. And sooner or later,
new term for me, quality escape. What does that mean?
You release a defect to your consumers.
Okay.
So quality
terminology is new to me. Escape, like it escaped your careful, watchful eye.
That is unfortunately what the behavior of fail fast, fix it fast has done. So you have all those design inputs up front engineering, then we release something into manufacturing and we put all of these quality gates, quality checks on the back end when we're already producing and manufacturing. And when you look at recalls, those recalls are because a quality issue left and was shipped to a customer and or a consumer. And typically they call them quality escapes. In our world, we call them defects. And Joe knows I always say go to recalls.gov. And that kind of opens your eyes to, wow, there's definitely still a quality issue in today's society.
So I definitely expect to see Rick Stockton's hand go up at some time soon. You're talking about design inputs, which is a lot of what he does for a living. How would someone like Rick work alongside either someone like you or a process team or a quality team to understand at the time that he's creating the concept and designing it that there's a flaw in it? It almost sounds like, wasn't that his job in the first place to design it with? This is, as you know, not my core function, but can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll actually take it back a few steps. The first thing you want to do is make sure you have the right requirements for the design, right? What's the use? Who's the user? What's the end function supposed to be? And are we communicating with all the stakeholders? So during the design, you're absolutely right. The intent should be to design something that doesn't fail. But we need to be real. The majority of products that are designed in that kind of proto developments, they have a lot of iterations, a lot of iterative design because there is failure, and that's okay. That's one stage of the life cycle of a product. Now, when you go into production, that's where all those design inputs, they should be quarantined, and you should have the right people reviewing that design, not just from a technical perspective, but from an impact, right? So regional, what's the use, who's using it, all of those things, that's where a lot of people get it wrong. Why do they get it wrong? Because they're moving too fast. They've probably had a lot of scope creep. They've had schedule and intervention resources thrown at this all the way up to the start of production. So now we're trying to push this thing out the door. So we meet that date, we meet that deployment date or shipment date. And that's where the design inputs and those stakeholder engagements, those reviews, that's where we get a little lazy at times. And that's why you see recalls. I mean, at the end of the day, in today's world, and right now, we have the technology and the brain power. And I've gone on record saying this many times. There should not be recalls in medical devices. It just, there shouldn't be. We have the technology, we have the brains, we have the people. If you look at the recalls, the majority of them, it's because we skipped something in our process. Typically, it's related to change in configuration management. We didn't review the change adequately, or we allowed a supplier change to come in and change the form, fit, or function of our full design, and that's caused issues when we've fielded the product, and our consumers start using it in ways we didn't think about it, and now it's in the body and it's causing problems. So for me, it's those design inputs are right before we go into production is where we get lazy.
Rick, I don't know how long you stay in an engagement when you're brought into a project. If you are still around on payroll, as it were, you, at the time that the thing is deployed, if you track it later and find out about a recall, are you aware of any project you've worked on in your career that was later recalled?
No, I haven't had a project that was recalled that I'm aware of. One of the reasons people select me is I started typing in a question, Joe, slightly before you started mentioning my name.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there are lots. Yeah. Oh, I know. There are lots of ways to think about this. One easy way to think about it is if you were going to replace the fence in your yard, which we recently did. You might build it yourself, you might get somebody in, but there's all kinds of questions you're going to ask. You're going to look at materials, construction methods, making sure it's on the correct line. There are all kinds of little questions, but you can imagine what it would be like if critical questions did not get asked and you just kind of walked up there with a hammer and nails and a few boards you got from the shed and started trying to replace your fence and forgot to do things like all those cement footings that hold the posts up so straight and the lines, and you didn't make sure that you didn't look at the YouTube that showed you how to build a straight fence and do a few of the basic things. And so a lot of times I'm working on a concept called a design pre-check, and it's for someone who perhaps for budget reasons or other reasons has a design, but they're really not sure. What are my tolerances going to do when I go into production? Have I designed something with such tight tolerances that normal production methods can't do it, and therefore the statistical probability of mismanufacture increases? Have I designed something to where I can look at the quality of it all the way through the process, or do I have to wait to get to the end? Because if I do that, that's going to induce a bias in manufacturing to cover over and omit having to look at certain things. When you've worked as many years on the production floor as I have, you start just accumulating a really large list of questions. And I think one of the points, and just one of them, that Joseph is making is that if you don't know the categories of questions to ask about your product, you can end up with a really, really big problem, and you can induce incentives in your group to overlook them and build in unconscious bias into your development process through not having asked the questions when you should have.
Luke, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to state that it's not that simple question of making quick money out of suboptimal products. Like we have customers that are waiting for a product and they need it to do their project. So it's not that you want to have it out on time for ourselves to make the money, but for our customers to do their project. And like we had one product that had suffers from bent PCBs, wherein connectors didn't make good contact. So out of a batch of about 100 PCBs, we searched the 3 or 4 that were as straight as possible and made a product out of it. We tested it in-house, and almost all of our disposables that were connected to it made good contact. But then we sent it out to our customers, and they can do their project, but they found out that they were suboptimal, that they had batches of disposables that didn't fit well. So yes, we got a suboptimal product out, and it's not that we recall them, but we replace them for a newer vision that is better. But it's not, for us, it's not that simple. It's not that you say that you want to have your product out just to make money, that you know that you made flaws in design or in production or whatever.
Larry, you want to just throw in your clip that you typed to me?
Yeah, Joseph is talking about something that the FDA became aware of in the late 80s, and it's exactly what he mentioned. They looked at the recall data on medical devices and determined that a significant, if not most of them, were caused by design defects, and hence the modification of the quality system regulation to require design controls. And it's kind of the government forcing companies to do it the right way, because they have a tradition. I worked in the industry for 20 years, and I know the pressure that you get from marketing on the new product and the market opportunity and the window that's available to you and the need to get it out there quickly. And I have nightmare stories about companies that I worked at that did that. So Joseph, you're speaking the gospel, and I encourage you. And FDA is smiling to know that there are people out there like you reminding people that they got to do it right the first time.
Well, let's continue the chat then, because I think they still need reminded.
So you heard quite a few things from Rick and Luke and Larry. What's your feedback for them?
You know, for me, and it's not just for them. They're all spot on, right? You know, where Rick is at, which is, if we take all those inputs that we're used to from the industry, and I've worked on a line, I've done it all, and all of those issues, and that's kind of why we call them quality escapes. You kind of create a CYA checklist in manufacturing. And if we build that mentality up front, and it's not just engineering, it's supply chain and having everybody in the enterprise that's responsible for that change engaged, absolutely. And then, you know, for me with the FDA and with all companies, I have a simple challenge. You know, I think our government should, you know, if it's a publicly traded company, shareholders typically are concerned about revenue, but why don't we have access to the changes that they do a year, right? The thousands and thousands upon changes they do every single year. And why is that? It's not all because of innovation. And I think we need to put some more rigor on change control and how they classify changes. And I think that would be revealing. I think you would see a lot of companies are doing things at the last minute that eventually is going to cause a disaster. I mean, look at the automotive industry. When they do a car recall, Joe, you've heard me say this. When they do a car recall, it's not because every single vehicle needs work. They don't know what's in the vehicle. So when you see a large recall of 300,000 to 1 million vehicles, it's because they don't know necessarily if the recalled part's actually there. If you've ever gotten a recall mailing, it'll say, we need you to bring your car in to see if you have the part in your vehicle. And it's no different for the medical device industry. So for me, I think the challenge would be for publicly and private owned medical device companies, and I would say this across all board, more and more companies are on that wellness medical device line anyway, right? As far as what's classified as a med device, why not have them tell us the changes they do as part of their annual report? Show us your change records. You don't have to show us confidential information, but show us how many changes you did this year, and why doesn't the government enforce classification? So is it true innovation, or is it a form, fit, or function fix, right? So if that's it, then you're going to have companies actually investing and doing things right. Today, I think it's still a smokescreen. That's just my personal. We've gotten better. Don't get me wrong. We've gotten a lot better, but we could still enforce. And I think executives should put this on. It shouldn't. The government shouldn't have to. I'm glad they do, but leadership should say, "Wait a minute. We don't have to release products with defects. There's no excuse for it." And they should just come out and say that.
I can see Larry has something to say. I have a question too, but Larry, go ahead.
Well, I'm smiling only because I've lived what he's talking about. When I was an FDA investigator, one of the first things I would look at is change control and a list of changes. And they specifically on their engineering change order notices, I expected them to have a section on there where they classified it as a design change or not. And how did I know that? Well, I went back to FDA in 2000 after 18 years in the industry. And I would tell my engineers that, if you do your design verification or design validation correctly, when you release your product, you won't make design changes. You will have done all that. And we will rate our success by the number of design changes that have to be made in the first 1 year of the distribution. And sometimes it was really good. Other times there were problems. So the idea of making that information public, in our annual report, I don't think you're going to find any company that'll do that because it's too much internal stuff that their competitors would love to know about. So that's why the FDA has to exist, is you got people out there who will shortcut. They will do it for economic reasons. You ask any CEO of any medical device company, do you ever want to release a defective product? What are they going to say? Well, of course not. We have great quality systems in our company. We're never going to release anything that's defective. And then the next week he's going, hey, we can't do all that testing. Are you crazy? We're going to miss our window of opportunity in the marketplace. And they ship a defective product. He goes, well, I didn't want to. But the fact is, the CEO is the chief quality officer of the company. And if you're a director of quality in a company, you need to assure that you keep that person informed of what's going on, and they're doing management reviews, and that they're driving quality initiatives from the corner office. If that's done, it gets attention. If you don't have, if it's lip service only from that CEO, you're going to have problems. And that's kind of the reality of the system out there. So,
if you do more testing, you're going to find more problems. And we know that that's not the way we're going to do things in this country. Sorry, Rick.
No.
And Larry.
Verification testing in the design phase is absolutely necessary. You need to find the failure modes. You need to challenge your design, and
I want to see if the human body's design is tested properly to see if it can fight coronavirus.
Well, okay, that's a whole other issue, but we're medical device guys, and we know our systems, and we know how to prevent problems.
I would argue that I am a medical device, but Joe, and I'm with Larry, I don't imagine any publicly traded company or any company is going to say, hey, everybody, look at all these things I did. But, and as you know, this isn't my expertise, I thought that once you hit a certain level of change or adaptation or whatever, you need to do a change report, and that gets filed. So aren't those reports publicly available? I mean, that which is sent to FDA, it becomes part of public record, doesn't it?
They don't get filed at the FDA, they get filed at the company. And the only way the FDA would be aware of the change is when they come and do the inspections, exactly like Larry said, and a good auditor will go right to change control.
Everyone is like, where's Michelle? We can't see her. This is unsatisfactory.
I docked and undocked, so I got to restart my computer for my thing.
Right.
My
Joe, this is Joanne.
Yeah, Joanne, it's your turn. You invited me to read your stuff, but you've been so prolific this morning that I had to have you speak for yourself.
I'm cooking while we talk. I don't want to burn it.
All right. The first thing you asked was, you said, design people should be using design of experiments to know the statistical probability of releasing a bad product.
Yeah, that we're past that. But for change control, regulatory should be involved in all your changes, because some changes may need to get reported to the FDA, because if they're in your original design package and you change anything that affects those requirements, then you do have to file a report with the FDA.
Exactly. And like, let's back that up to one of Joe's points from the beginning of the presentation about stakeholders. If you don't have regulatory as a stakeholder early on, I mean, right from the start, you're going to miss important design requirements, specifications, performance criteria, testing. And I just see over and over clients who haven't planned for these things because they were tinkering and prototyping, and then they thought their prototype was ready to go, but it was never designed to meet certain performance standards.
Joanne, you had a couple of things about Six Sigma. Joe, you've surely been trained in Six Sigma?
Yeah, I'm a black belt.
A black belt.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
What is CPK, Joanne? You wrote that in a note?
Well, Joseph can explain that then if he's.
CPK needs to be around 1.33 to have a Six Sigma process. I don't know what that means.
So you're just talking about statistical and as far as the quality side of the house. But as Joanne and Michelle and Rick and Lawrence all know, you can do as much statistical analysis as you want and still release a defective product. And it's
So
rarely,
true.
yes, you can. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you could have a great design, and if someone deviates from that design in manufacturing, and it still happens today, or they use a part that they thought was interchangeable and it wasn't, in a manufacturing floor, you could release a defective product. And this isn't just about design. This is about medical devices, right? And the quality of them. And there's a lot of things that could go wrong. You could have a solid design. You have a perfect design, and you can still release a defective product.
Yeah,
And
there's a difference between having a perfect design and being designed for manufacturability and operator error and flashing from the mold and all of these things. There's so much more than just having a functional prototype that has all the bells and whistles and does exactly what you wanted it to do.
I have to congratulate Rick Stockton for his incredible discipline this morning. He's a loquacious little guy, and you just used words like design for manufacturability, and he was silent and he listened and he let you finish your sentence. It was amazing. The chair recognizes John Richard Stockton. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
It is really, really easy to have questions that don't ask the right things when you're deciding how you're going to decide when the product is ready to launch. It's important to understand that no product is going to be 100% perfect, but if you are 99.98% reliable, as long as that 0.02% is not, oh my God, we're all going to die right now, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. But the question is never as simple as that. So to summarize, it is so important, the questions that you ask before you launch into a design. And it's also important to understand that you may have to revise those questions a little bit because unforeseen things can happen. It's a really, really big deal.
Thank you. That was rather succinct.
Thank you.
Appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Luke, you had something? I'm promoting Dwayne and Kevin as well. This is a robust, interactive group today, Joseph. You don't have to do really any talking at all.
so that's the plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joanne, you had two more things that you wrote, please.
Oh, no, that's okay.
They've been addressed adequately?
Yeah. I think.
Okay. Let's see. Kevin, you asked a question?
If I could interrupt real quick, I do want to, Joanne's questions, they're really good. And part of what she raised during the Q&A is it's having a closed loop process, right? So a lot of companies are so focused on getting that product out the door. What they don't do is close the loop and ensure and go back and say, did we meet the intent? right, of the change. And that's kind of where Joanne was headed. And I wanted to kind of summarize that. And we, you know, and what Lawrence was saying earlier, you know, I've worked with companies that send certain people away when auditors are coming in, you know, so there's a lot you can do to get past an audit and look
Management 101.
look decent, but having a closed loop
I would be
process,
sent
that's
away.
kind of where
I would definitely be
Joanne
one of the
is.
people they send away.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to say something and it's going to be like, just can you
Yeah.
leave? Just, we'll let you know when to come back.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. I know a lot of people that get vacations during audits, but it's about closing the loop and making sure the intended design and intended functionality of the product, we actually met it. And a lot of companies don't go back and close that loop, and they don't do it on cost either, right? And it's one thing we're not talking about right now. It's also, we plan this design with schedule and with budget, and we spend a lot of money and intervention resources to make sure that product gets out the door. That's a whole nother discussion topic, but it's all around quality. And you know, Rick's, and it's all right around all those inputs, right? And making sure we have the right stakeholders and make sure we don't deviate from sound processes, you know, and that's on the design side and on the manufacturing and logistics. You know, there have been some things that happened during logistics, and they're minor, that have caused some issues, but for the most part, it's deviations of sound processes to get something out faster that causes a problem. It's rarely something nefarious, right? That's a good thing, that we should mention. Rarely are defects released or recalls because of a nefarious issue. It's typically because of either speed or cost. We violated a process, or we did a workaround because of schedule or cost. And that's what we're trying to take out. And, you know, Rick's right on. We want to get everyone to that kind of 98% threshold across the spectrum, you know, design, manufacturing process, supply chain, and things are getting more complex with COVID, with supply chain. So I think everybody here is spot on. And I just wanted to tie it all together with what Joanne's brought up with Q&A. It's about closed loop as well. So it's not just a downstream. We need to make sure we go back and feed in any information we've caught along the way that could help us next time. And a lot of companies don't do a good job of doing that. They really don't. They might have the data. Typically, companies are great at getting all of that data. They're horrible at integrating it and making it useful for further designs or further innovation.
Kevin, you have a straightforward question. You wrote, how do I do verification design?
Yeah, might speak a little bit more. What I mean is that I read some books, and basically they talk about principles, how to just we mentioned that functionality you meet. But however, in reality is that in the animal or the human being, because of medical device, we're all in this group. And it's hard to, as early stage, to do verification of your design. For example, you say, okay, I will reach the drainage, my device drainage every hour, let's say 50 cc of fluid. That's a put example. But however, it's number one, if you want to do animal studies, there are a lot of ethical issues, cost, facility, lots of issues. And sometimes you can do it on the mannequin in some device. Sometimes you don't have that kind of mannequin. And also you may, practically speaking, you say, oh, well, they have a loop, we should meet the criteria, this and that. And actually a lot of company, I found what they do is that they do a study after marketing. And so after marketing, and they were collecting data from clinical studies, they give the money to hospital or some professors in university, and then say, okay, came out of data support what I have designed. So actually, really, as we mentioned before, that's a very good point. They really didn't do verification of design at the beginning, or can say before the marketing. So I don't know how to resolve this. For myself, right now is faced with this challenge.
Can anyone on the call talk about what Kevin's working on? He might be able to address verifying design before he gets too far down the line.
There is one thing that will really help you to do that, and one is going to be your design inputs and outputs, and those are sometimes done in a perfunctory way. And this is to Luke's point too, is which I was listening really hard to when he first did that, and the idea of fail fast, if taken to an extreme, does result in recalls, does result in problems, and does result in actual damage. And there are two ways to get there. One, of course, is nefariousness and carelessness. And one is by incorrectly designing your design inputs and outputs, by incorrectly specifying them. One big thing that you want to do when you go into a product is know exactly what you must do, and be very mindful of over-specifying. I have seen people specify something to a whole decimal place more than they should have. And it didn't need to be that tight. It didn't need to be that accurate. It didn't need to be that good. They got their product into a place where it was really, really overpriced, or they had two parts which were fitting into each other. And they could have had a lot of space. They could have had, it would have functioned if there was a lot of room for it to move around, but they designed it so tight that everything had to be so precise that the cost went up and the likelihood of failure for something getting stuck actually increased. And so they raised the precision and built themselves into product failure. And so your designs and inputs and outputs need to be very intelligently gone through, because it's just as easy to lose your project completely by over-specifying it as it is to lose performance by under-specifying.
Michelle?
And to back Rick's point up another level, I mean, it comes back to, did you correctly specify your user needs in the first place, and what you were designing to, and what the end use was really supposed to do? And I think that that's a big part that's missing when you read all of the guidances on design controls. Design controls starts at design inputs, but design inputs started at user needs, came from user needs. In my opinion, user needs to be specified as part of the design control process. And I think it's really overlooked. And that's where all this focus on usability is starting to come in. And if you look at the guidance for usability 62366, you have all of this work for specifications to do before you get even to feed them into design controls. There's like 5 or 6 usability steps before design inputs start.
I have to interject something, just smile. I'm laughing. This is our 39th call. So we've been doing this 3/4 of a year. This is the first time ever that participation was so rampant that the guest speaker put himself on mute. Never happened before. So while Dwayne and Luke have been very patient, Joseph, now that you're off mute, do you have anything to say about the last 10 minutes of your presentation?
My presentation? No, I think it's great. I think it's good to have like-minded individuals. I think for, Kevin, to be honest, this is where, and I don't know your background, your role or what you're really doing. But what I would say is, it sounds like from my perspective, the first person you should call is Rick. If you're looking at ways to really kind of improve your design verification process and identify the inputs you actually need, just have that. I said this many times, Joe's heard me say it, pride kills companies. Pride kills initiatives. You can't always think you're the best at everything. You have to have a network. This is, what Joe's done here. Use it. So Kevin, I would say, contact Rick after this and work out an arrangement where maybe Rick can help you and give you some guidance. You know, and then you've got Michelle as well, and go and I've read Dwayne's question. It's a great question. I'd like to get to that here in a second. For me, it's we're all passionate about the same thing, but the reality is we rarely communicate or work together with companies. Take a little pride out, and we got to remind your customers as well that there are experts in this field that can make you better faster. But for me, I think it's, you know, Rick touched on a lot of things, you know, and it goes back down to where Michelle kind of closed it out on as far as user requirements, you know, and that's the CM2 mantra, right? I mean, clear, concise, and valid requirements across the entire design, across your entire processes, administrative and the physical. That's why, you know, CM2 is an FDA supported process. When you look at CAPA, you can't really be CAPA compliant on the change side without following CM2. Unfortunately, a lot of companies don't want to train their people. So they'll say, yeah, we got a change process. Here's the paper. But when you go and you assess what they're really doing, they're not following that process. So there's still a lot of work to be done. We need companies to invest in their workforce, train their workforce, hold people accountable. You know, that's kind of where Dwayne's question is. And I'll kind of close with that is, you know, we got to remind companies and individuals and leaders about accountability, because it's real freaking expensive if you release a defect.
We haven't had given Dwayne the chance to be heard, but before that, I just want to say I feel like such a proud parent right now. Look at our little family all working together with their various.
The Brady Bunch.
Thanks, Daddy.
Mr. Mancini, what did you write that Joe's referring to?
Yeah, so my comment was, I see this a lot with the biocompatibility of medical devices where people go make changes to their supplier. Maybe they're getting polyurethane from some company and they go get it from someone else, and they don't address that change. And the danger, without boring everyone, I mean, could be in how they make that polyurethane. They could be different in how that breaks down, but that's not the real concern. The concern is the residuals from the different manufacturing process, and they don't address it. And they don't address it until they have a problem. And we see this a lot with like adhesives for maybe a package.
Folks, where you work and what you do, Dwayne, so they have perspective on your angle.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I work in the CRO world. I was at NAMSA for a long time, and now I'm at Covance. But I used to be in the biocompatibility of medical devices for a long time. I'm a chemist by training.
And actually look in the what do you need channel after this, because somebody needs a CRO.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. But something I saw then was, you know, they'd call us and say, oh, we're seeing a reaction to the patch we're using now. And I'd say, okay, well, have you changed your adhesive? Yeah, we changed the supplier. And then you go and test that. And the leachables or the extractables that are coming off are different. And they never address it until the end. And that's when it gets expensive. Because now you have to rush everything through. You have to deal with those problems instead of just dealing with it up front. And we see it. I've been into companies that have like class 1 medical devices, and what they did for those changes is a train wreck. And it's just waiting to go off, you know, off the rails. And yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to add that comment, but and just, you know.
To Dwayne's point there, you know, class 1 devices technically don't require design controls, which is crazy. That's just bad business practices, no matter what industry you're in, is to not document the design of your product. So of course, change control, which is required, is going to be a mess because you don't have any documentation to assess your change to in the first place.
Michelle, I went to a company that has a class 1 medical device. They changed the plastic they were using, a whole different plastic. I mean, it's like you sit there and you're like, oh my goodness, how is this still? How is this happening? I don't know. It's crazy.
Luke, you've been patient.
I am. There was a rant about the changes that were not documented, or at least not shared. Well, Michelle is right. We document everything, but it's in with our own company, and then the auditor sees it. We've done it well. But at least in our case, I think about 80% of all changes come from obsolete components or components that are no longer available. And maybe 10% is for improvement of quality, and maybe another 10% to save money. But the most of them are for obsolete components. And yes, you pick a replacement part, or there's a replacement part is advised, but you do it on certain aspects, and you never know if other aspects of that product will kill you in the end. And there's another thing, that even if you don't change anything in your product, let's say you have something mechanical and you've made a mold for it, and the mold is good for 100,000 or 1 million pieces. In the end, the mold will wear out. So the quality of the product is not the same in the beginning. So you get a slight creep towards less optimal quality, which is nobody's fault, but it's sometimes very hard to track.
That's the bolts on the Titanic. That's the whole story. Somebody did a like for like swap for a bolt to a different supplier, and it wasn't like for like. And the next thing you know, the unsinkable ship is sinking, and the area that it hit the iceberg is the area where they ran out of the original bolts that met the initial design specification.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess the wharf in Ireland couldn't test it itself.
I thought it was because the iceberg left a huge gaping hole in the boat.
Nope. It left a hole in the boat because the bolts didn't meet their original design specification, so the whole hole tore open, and it would not have torn open according to this particular documentary if the bolts hadn't sheared.
That wasn't in the movie. Are you sure?
No, the movie is not the reality.
Oh.
There's
Jose?
so much you can do as a manufacturer to test, because a lot of times the problems only come out in the field after years, and you only have a short time to test. Of course, you can do wear testing at test houses, but it's very hard to see what you actually have to test.
Jose?
Yeah, no, I jotted down a couple of words just during the discussion. I think it's been a great discussion, but two of them are focus and courage. And the word focus came to mind to me because, design controls are great, and process is a very useful tool, but it's never going to be sufficient. I think Rick made the comment earlier that if you're not asking the right questions, you can leave gaping holes in your quality. And so that's why it's so important, in my view, to have people who are really experts at the thing that you're developing. And sometimes that means, bringing people from outside. So to Joseph's point earlier, you need to bring down the pride level, and at some points recognize, hey, this particular area, we have a suspicion that there might be some important questions to ask there that we're not sure what they are. Let's find somebody who is an expert in that field to come in and help us think about this. Because if you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to find your risks. And if you don't have the experience in that specific area, you're not going to know which are the right questions. So it's just the importance of having people in the development process who have a lot of experience, and experience tends to come from focus, right? Somebody who's been doing a specific thing for a very long time. So that's just one thought that came to mind during the discussion. And the other one was courage, right? And so this one ties in a little bit to what Larry said earlier. There's no CEO that wants to launch a defective product, but there's always competing interests. And it's a question of, where does the courage come in to say, I'm willing to miss Q2 to make sure that I don't miss Q2 3 years from now because we've got a massive recall. And it's a little bit of the perverse incentives that exist, in industry where sometimes CEOs are being judged by the next 3 quarters and not 3 years from now. But it's that part where, as engineers and as product developers, I feel so fortunate whenever I'm working with a CEO who gets it. And when you go, what, we found this thing and it's going to delay launch by 3 months, but we have to just solve this problem. And I've worked with CEOs who are like, okay, that's the priority. We got to make sure we launch it right. And it means that, for startup companies, for example, you always have to make sure that you've got enough capital, right? Because these things are going to happen. You have to always assume crap is going to happen. And, you can make your best case Gantt chart, but you should also have in your back pocket your worst case Gantt chart. And, you know, it's like I tell people, like, I like to have almost two, like one that you're showing the executive level and you're going, look, this is realistically what we should be planning for. And maybe one that's a bit more aggressive that the team is working toward to try to hit, you know, good tempo. But at the end of the day, be able to pull out some of that slack out of your back pocket and say, hey, we've got to sacrifice schedule because this is important. And we've got to make sure that we launch a high quality product. So there's a lot of courage that's required within a team because you're going to have those competing interests. And, you know, you got to build that into your culture. That's it.
Two things. One, Jose said crack. Second, as you know, I promote to the screen the folks who are full members of Premium. Let me read what Jim Potter asked. He said, did I really hear Dwayne mention adhesives? I'm not sure why he said that or asked that. Dwayne, maybe you have an idea, or Jim, if you want to leave a further comment about why that was something you brought up.
I don't have a clue unless
Okay.
unless
I'll
he's a
go on to Lee Rogers' question. He asks, what are your thoughts, this is so Michelle, what are your thoughts on newcomers into the medical device manufacturing of class 2 medical devices, specifically ventilators and IVDs due to the COVID-19 pandemic when these are being released under EUAs? How quickly can FDA respond to reported or unreported AEs? What's an AE?
Adverse events,
Got it.
right?
Time, so I get credit.
Yeah. So that's kind of two separate questions. We've got a front end kind of how to design them, how to get them cleared under the EUA, and then adverse events is after you get into the market. So to take the first part of that, I see people who are designing products that have either authorization letters or enforcement policies, and they have brand new technologies, and that they assume that because their technology is so novel and it solves a problem in a totally different way than what we have now, that the FDA is just going to be in love with it and rush it to the market. And that is not happening. Their entire intent for the EUA is to find technologies that are already cleared in other markets, that already have full testing, especially electrical safety, 62304 testing for documentation and test cases for software, like all the things. They want all the things still, even for the EUA, short of a 510K. So your best bet is to just start design controls, do it right, make a test plan, and don't go to the EUA until you've got your test results that they have specified for consideration in that guidance document. Also, just start your 510K process if your technology is really that new and novel. And then on the second part of that, for the adverse event reporting, that is a really interesting and complicated policy right now, because the FDA, that is the only one of the very few parts of the quality system regulation that is not waived under emergency use. It is for across the board. Everything requires complaints, adverse event reporting, and some level of inventory management and tracking. Products under the EUA still have to register with the ESG Electronic Submission Gateway. They still have to fill out the form, the 3500A. It's still, they're still under an obligation to report. As far as not reporting, it's just not right. But there's no way to know if somebody's not reporting if they don't have the integrity to do so.
Rick, you reinserted yourself. You got something?
Yeah, I picked the darndest time to do an internet service upgrade. The guy's been there since 9 o'clock outside my house working on the box.
Did you have something you wanted to add right now? Michelle, you got to go?
I've got to go.
Okay.
So thank you, Joe. I've enjoyed talking with you.
We enjoyed you too, Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Rick, anything? No. I'll put you in at the
No,
end.
I missed the last couple of minutes while I was trying to reconnect.
Yeah, we were talking about you. I thought I'd give you the stage again, what with it being your hour. I think you clocked about 3.15 minutes of conversation. So you've lit a fire under the group.
Good.
You just
That's fun.
mentioned the word quality and people are all aflutter. And yet, and I've said this before, when people ask me, hey, Joe, do you know anyone who, in 9 years now, no one has ever asked me, Joe, do you know anyone who does quality process? They've asked, who do you recommend for a quality management system? They've asked,
Which is an IT tool.
my submission, but they've never asked me about process and avoiding recalls and doing it right the first time and CM2 and
It's a shame.
I don't know, you know.
For me, and you're right. I've lived it. For me, it's got to be, when you've got, regulatory agencies, the FDA needs to be clear on their language as far as what a quality management system is and what product lifecycle management is. These aren't just IT tools; these are methodologies, and that's where in the last 10 years, we just think these software vendors are magically going to install this tool at our business or our organization, and magically it's going to fix all of our issues, and all of our processes now are magically going to be better. And that's not true. What we do is we buy these QMS systems or tools, and we shoehorn in our bad processes as requirements for the tool. And guess what? Now we just have a more efficient way to get things out the door that are not right. And I think we need to take a step back. That's the clients we do work with get that, right? The product lifecycle management, change management, configuration management, those are processes that are supported by our workforce and they're empowered by an IT solution. It's not the reverse. And it's the same for QMS. You hear all these companies and people talking about their QMS system. They're mostly talking about an IT tool. Let's talk about the QMS platform. That's your workforce, your supply chain, and your processes. Let's get all that right, get those processes right, because those are the requirements and those tell you the type of QMS tool you actually need. So it is disappointing. There are a lot of companies that are getting it. I think we're at a time now where, with the ability of social media to rapidly review a product and get feedback and see defects, I think the times are going to and are forcing companies to invest in proper processes, proper workforce development, and then you purchase the right IT tool. But we got to stop pretending that an IT tool is going to solve all of our problems, because that's just almost comical.
As your marketing friend who is prone to giving unsolicited counsel, and I just for folks, I've looked forward to working with Joe for quite a while, but truly, unless it's an internationally broadcast webinar, it's kind of tough to get his time with everything he's got going on. I was thinking that you have a category problem, and that is, everyone knows I need to submit this 510K, I need help doing it. So now it's a matter of who can help me. You might do a search, 510K consultants. You might say, hey, Joe, do you know anyone who? But in terms of the category of what you do for a living, people aren't aware of the category. They don't know what they don't know. They don't realize that, hey, I've got a project manager. She's in charge of making sure the process runs properly. That's, he's doing Agile. He's going into the office saying, we need you to sign this thing. You haven't signed it yet. You're saying I need to bring in a consultant to help me do that? I mean, that's what Joanne does. She walks around, or, Bethany is over there. That's what she does.
Now, what they do is firefighting, right? And what they do is babysitting poor processes and workforces that are trained poorly or haven't been trained at all.
That the category of what you do is underserved, unknown. People don't realize what they need. And it just so happens at the very time I was talking, Jose wrote in, I'd love to hear more specifically about what Joseph's company does, like in detail. What does an engagement look like? What types of interactions and deliverables result? So here is a platter for you to sell. Help us understand why would I buy you? What exactly would I get?
Okay. So IPX is a multi-sectored organization. So I'll break it down. We have a training sector. We have the CM2.
Screen. Is there anything you want to show, like a, not that big circle thing that confuses the shit out of me?
No, I'll talk through it. And if someone's interested, they could contact me afterwards on Slack, or they could go to the website and we could talk. But from a training, we have the CM2 standard, which is the global standard for change and configuration management. And what that really is, and what we've always said, is a quality management platform. To make it very, very simple, CM2 is a quality management platform for every industry. It has over 19 operating standards, associated administrative procedures. It is a true operating platform with application methods. So when our clients go through CM2 training, the Apples, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Edwards, the Johnson & Johnsons, it's to get better. It's to ensure quality. That platform across their processes, their workforce, and their tools are as robust as possible. That's CM2 training. Then we have the RISE platform, which is diversity and inclusion, which is respect through inclusion, service, and equity. And we have a lot of other trainings. We do a lot of training. But on the CM2 side, this is all about quality. And that's why it is the global standard for change and configuration management. And most people instantly think change and configuration management is just a simple little thing. I just need to document what I'm going to do and do what I documented. And that's not the case. We all know product lifecycle management, which is part of that quality management platform, is huge. It's daunting. It's all about the inputs that Rick was talking about. It's the regulatory requirements on the administrative side that Michelle was talking about. It's the supply chain requirements that Jose was talking about. That is CM2. We are the standard for managing all of those inputs and outputs and how to communicate them, how to structure them. So that's CM2. On our service side, our True North model is quite simple. It's a, quite frankly, and it's a no BS way of going in and assessing who you are as an organization. We come in, we assess your processes, we assess your workforce, we assess your products, your recalls, all of your systems. It's not a 1 week assessment where we come in and give you a PowerPoint presentation and say, here's who you are, and then we walk away. We come in and we give you a very detailed report of your people, your processes, your data, and your systems. We tell you your strengths and the opportunities and where you've got some gaping opportunities to fix things that are going to catch you really quick. And then we work with the companies to change their processes, change their workforce or train their workforce, and the same with their systems. So now we've updated your processes, maybe implemented some new ones. Those are going to drive some system changes. So we work with the organization to change their QMS system, their PLM system, their ERP, their MES. And it's a continual improvement. That True North model is, a lot of companies, they are good companies that we work with, they get off the path, right? And if you don't calibrate that compass, you're going to continue to go the wrong way. So we call it calibration. Let's come in, assess who you are, calibrate that compass, and get you going in the right place. So from a IPX, in summary, that's kind of what we do. We have the training, we have the standards, and we also have the services where we could actually help you get better. And we like to call ourselves enterprise Sherpas. We just roll our sleeves up and actually do a lot of the work that you don't have time to do. And as Joe was mentioning, a lot of people say, well, we got a project manager, we have a quality manager, we have a document control manager, we have all these people under them. The majority, if we're being honest, they're firefighters. They're there to make sure things just keep moving through. And if something urgent comes up that we miss, we throw everybody at them and they fix that problem. And then they go back pushing things through and they're firefighting. And they're really not getting innovation out the door as fast as they could, because we're always catching quality issues throughout the workflow. And we got so many people focused on that. we're not taking care of the people putting oil in the river upstream, right? We've got this oil in the lake. I always use this analogy, or oil in the ocean. So we put a bunch of sponges in the river to catch the oil, right? And we do that year after year after year, and oil still kind of trickles through. What we need to do is pause and go figure out where the source of the oil is coming from. And typically within a company, we find that it's legacy processes and legacy ways of doing work. That's just in a nutshell, IPX fixes all of that. We want your processes, your workforce to be fluid and cohesive to ensure you get product or services out the door that are damn near close to perfect.
Say?
Yeah, I'm curious. So how much of that training and process is specific to medical device development versus more kind of broadly?
So we have industry agnostic, and then on the medical side, we work with pretty much every big name medical company, the top 10 on the 500 list. It's dedicated into understanding who you are as a medical device organization, where you're going. So I think what you would find is if you went through like our -10 or -12, like a 1 day or 2 day course, you'd go, crap. Our company does, 10% of this and hides the rest, right? But the CM2 standard, it's agnostic and it applies to every industry. At the end of the day, when you look at what CM2 is from a quality management platform, understanding your administrative requirements, those regulatory issues, understanding the physical requirements, all those hierarchies, how they have to be integrated. We like to call it a DNA, right? We call it the CM2 DNA, and we have a whole module on that, or the model-based enterprise. All those elements within your company, they compose your DNA. And Joe knows this. My son has a DNA defect that will never be able to be cured or fixed, most likely in his lifetime. But as an organization, you have the unique ability to make your DNA better. And that's through changing some of these legacy ways of working and legacy processes to be the company of the future. And that's what we're about. But going through the training, why we like to promote the training in parallel with the services, is because that way you know what we're talking about and we don't have to be there forever. A lot of consultancy companies, they want a 5-year, 10-year contract. We want to teach you to fish, right?
Can you get more specific? Like when you're talking about change control training, for example, what does that encompass? Like what is it, not the full syllabus, but what level of detail are you going into for that?
Give me more context on level of detail. So change control as a product change, or are you talking process change?
I think he's saying, okay, I'm opening up my wallet.
Right.
I'm willing to buy something. What exactly am I buying, and when, Right.
So what I'd like to do is, one, from our professional track, it's 9 courses. Each course is 2 days apiece. And you get into application requirements, product hierarchy, change control. You get through all of the detail on those, what we call our -500 standard, which is those 19 key operating standards and the supporting procedures. So we break it down. So that's a professional track. And then the comprehensive is courses 1 through 6. So it's 12 days, right? And you don't do it cohesively. Most companies do course 1 and course 2 1 week, and then they come back and do course 3 and 4 the next month. Some people want to do an advanced series where they just push the whole training through in 2 weeks. And then we have some more application only, which is 1 or 2 days. But comprehensive training is the 6 courses. The professional level, which we have a global congress, much like Joe's Premium for med device, but it's industry agnostic. So professionals sit on a cross-industry board. So you've got the Apples, you've got the Edwards, you've got the Johnsons, the Microsofts, the Cummins, the big names. They sit on this and they discuss these topics in detail. But the training is very, very detailed. I took it in 2000. I was hooked. I was a user and a customer of the company I now run, if that tells you anything. And it changed what we did in the automotive industry. And then I was an executive at Rolls-Royce, and the same thing there. So it's quite detailed. You go through every element in what you would typically call a QMS table of contents, right? But this is very detailed. You get into product structure, administrative structures, the change control. You get into requirements for who should be in your technical review, who should be in your impact, what you should do in an impact analysis, what you should do from an executive review, what's your escalation path, right? Where's the efficiencies there or the inefficiencies? A lot of companies have so many executive sign-offs, it's just burdensome. And that's why they have issues. So it's quite detailed. And on the change side, we are the only one. We own the IP to the closed loop change process. So what Joanne was talking about earlier, that is from a change management, pure change management, from the time we have an idea or the time we have a problem to the time we've implemented that, it's closed loop. So we monitor that throughout the entire life cycle.
It sounds intimidating to me. And it sounds like something that, you started by saying, we've got all the big guys that you can imagine. Can small guys reasonably afford you? And I'm thinking, take the training. Are you going to train one person at my company and then you're going to have like a dedicated person talk to one person, or it doesn't make sense unless I have 5 of them? And, can you?
Yeah. So we work with startups all the time, and SMBs all the way up into large enterprises. And it is just that. We have a company now where we've worked with 1 or 2 individuals for a few years. They've gone through the training. They've taken it publicly. They've also been invited. We get approval for some of the larger enterprises as long as there's not going to be any confidential information shared. They've set in some of those trainings. We're working with Bear right now on a large training initiative. And we're working with a startup, and very similar. They just want to get better. And typically what you see with the startups, it's making sure their foundation's ready, right? They're just scared. They've got a great idea. Their marketer says, yep, there's a demand for this. We definitely have to build it. We have to sell it. But now they're like, okay, we got to be a real business. So what do we need to have in place foundationally from a process perspective? So they might send one person through the comprehensive, and then 5 of the resources through the 2-day class where they all can speak the same thing, but they're going to put 2 people in charge of ensuring their quality management platform is based off of CM2. So yeah, the costs are, comparable to college courses, right? It's not some astronomical, oh my gosh, they're overcharging us. It's their fair prices. And we work with a lot of companies, and I think Joe knows this. During COVID, we offered free training to anyone that was laid off because we think it's that important.
I would have totally talked about that if I'd known that. So follow up with me about how someone takes advantage of that. Jose, is your question satisfied?
Yeah. I think, the last piece I might ask is that, with whenever you're implementing a quality management system, like we've got one in place, it's based on the experience of the team. We've got a very experienced director of quality assurance, regulatory affairs. But I do find that, you're always, what you're given from the guidance documents from FDA and ISO and everything tend to be quite broad and generic. I think that's a good thing in the sense that it allows flexibility for you to implement something that matches your business and your culture and everything. But it leaves an open question of, all right, we've implemented it like this. Is this the best way that it could be implemented? We're certainly within the guidelines, we fit under that, but is it optimal in some sort of way? And I do see, the value of when you've got an organization that's maybe seen it in thousands of different ways, or that's been their core focus for years, the value that might bring. So I guess, it sounds like when you're thinking about, you might bring a quality assurance consultant to come in and help you put in your QMS. It sounds like, if I'm understanding correctly, what you guys do and say, okay, we go one step farther and we go like, this is why I was asking how detailed, like on just one specific thing, like change controller, whatever it is, design controls, whatever it is, just to understand like how detailed it is and what's it based on. Like, why is it that I'm going, okay, Joseph's company has, like real authority in speaking about, how you should be implementing this particular system because it's based on X. You mentioned CM2. It's not that clear to me why that should, be a strong authority, or like, what is that based on? So I've got some answers, still a little bit nebulous, but I'll do some digging because it's interesting. As the president of my company, I believe what Larry was saying. It is ultimately my responsibility to make sure that my team's operating under the best quality processes, and we're always looking to improve them. And, it's intriguing, to work with an organization that's all they do.
Yeah, if you look at us like from a CM2 perspective, and then I'll just give you an analogy to what you're talking about. The standard's been around for 30 years, and it's been used by every regulatory agency in the world, and and all the major players. And we could give you data on that. And quite honestly, I'll introduce you to our board. It's like, again, it's pretty much every company you've ever heard of, and let them tell you. But when we come in, it's like if you're trying to climb Everest, right? You've got to do all the training. You've got to have all the right gear. You're not going to do that on your own. You're not going to succeed. You're going to die on the mountain. And a lot of people do. It's having someone come in and say, this is the gear you need. They assess you first, right? They say, you're not in shape. You have the wrong gear. You're not prepared for this mentally or physically. You say you are, you think you are, but here's the honest truth. Here's the assessment report. So let's just say you want us to come in and just focus in on change management. Depending on the size of your company, if you're a large organization, multi-sited, it might be a 3-week assessment where we review every site. We review your processes that document what you say you're doing. Then we find out what you're really doing. So we give you a full analysis of everything you are doing and you're not doing from a process perspective, workforce, do a diagonal slice of all those people, look at your systems, and make sure and also understand what you're building and who your customers are. And do you have the right requirements? So this isn't a high level, put some sticky notes, no offense to that process, sticky notes on a board for a couple of days and then go away and think we could solve world hunger. This is come in, identify who you really are. And we're going to tell you, we sign an NDA, you've got to show us everything that you've hidden under the carpet, right? You got to show us the things, the almost, and you've got to be honest too. And your employees need to know that. As a president, you need to say, I need you to be honest. If there's things that you don't tell me that I don't know about, you got to let it out, because those are things that could kill our company. There's a lot of companies that have celebrated ISO awards over the last 20 years. Guess what? They went bankrupt because of quality defect or recall, or they're a poorly run organization because they never truly got in below that guideline, right? At a guideline, they look real pretty. When you start digging into them, they got a lot of issues. And I'll give you data on that, Jose. But at the end of the day, there's a reason CM2 is that kind of golden standard. The Dash 500 used for QMS. Every major PLM system in the world was based off of CM2. So there's a lot to that we give you from a CM2 perspective. But for what we do on the services, we are the Sherpa. We're going to come in and we're going to identify who you are, where you're trying to go, and we're going to identify what you need to get there. And that's a pretty high level analogy, but most companies can't do that and won't do that, and do it in a way where it's also about organizational change management, right? This is a moment for your company to get better. You have some jaded individuals in your company that'll probably say, yeah, that'll never happen here, or we've tried that before, or this was a poorly run initiative, and they're right. And those are typically the people, and every one of my resources will tell you this, those are the ones that we want to go after first, because we want to turn them into advocates. Because if you turn that person into an advocate, guess what? Everyone else in the company is going to listen. And it is about top down, but you need to get some of the naysayers within the company. You need to get to them too.
Sounds to me as though you picked up a new customer today. Jose,
At least a new acquaintance.
I'm going to send you back to the gallery. Joe, as is often the case with these, we had a title for this talk. We didn't really talk about that. The word quality did come up, but we talked about the state of quality in medical devices today, and doing your topic a terrific disservice. Can you, in 2 minutes, tell us your assessment of the state of quality in medical devices today? And let me frame it as like a trend. Are we seeing more quality, less quality? What are you seeing? What do you think the trends are? What should we look out for? 2 minutes.
I would say prior to COVID, we were on a slow trend upwards, where we were really starting to take it serious. And I think we had the experts, the networks starting to work together. And my fear now is because of the supply chain impact and the political turmoil, that's going to cause some issues. And I think we're going to slip a bit. And that's a big fear of mine. I think we're cutting corners because of the remote working. I think we're going to run into some HIPAA violations as well. We could get into all sorts of complex issues here, but you've got a lot of things going on now in different parts of the world at people's homes, and you've had supply chains rapidly decimated. And I do think we're going to slip, and I hope we're prepared for that.
it sounds to me as though COVID, which is reducing our profit, is even more of a reason to bring someone with your expertise into the organization, which will, no offense, cost some money and potentially lower my profit even further in the short term. And some companies who are already like on either side of red or black are like, I hear you, man, but I can't afford to do that right now. And I guess that's the route to bankruptcy. I mean, there's no real.
Yeah, there's ways around that. You know, I mean, if you're just trying to hold on a budget until things kick off, a lot of companies are waiting for Q4, right? I think a lot of inventory has been really depleted. So I think you're going to see Q4 for a lot of companies, especially the tier ones, tier twos, tier three suppliers. They're going to be busy in Q4 if they've survived.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we also understand we do work with clients where, you know, if payment needs to be deferred because now is the opportunity to be more efficient and to be more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is a little risk on our side, but we're not there to see companies go bankrupt. We're there to see them thrive.
I know you know Nick Anderson, and I had him on a few weeks back, and he was talking about how basically unless you do a health economics study, you're not getting any credence in front of a value analysis committee. And it's costly. And a great time to do one is while you're doing your clinical trials and other things that you can't be marketing anyhow. So at least get this most critical marketing thing done during the time that you otherwise couldn't be doing it. I could see a parallel here where, yeah, there's a lot of things amiss right now. And we have a lot of broken this and that due to COVID. But this is the time to come in and focus somewhere really imperative to the long-term viability of the company. So,
yeah, and you know, and you're spot on. And it's a good time to train your workforce. You know, and as an individual, you know, I know for me personally, this would have been a great time for me to figure out how to get into better shape, right? Because I'm not traveling as much as I was.
You look
I am doing
fantastic.
But we all
are like, I should look as good as that guy. And he's got problems. Look at me. As we close in the next minute or two, would you kindly tell our friends what you do every morning now?
Sure. I since COVID started, I have been volunteering at St. Martin's de Port. It's a food kitchen, and we're serving between 350 and 500 meals a day, one at a time. And I'm the parking lot server. So we serve hot meals for lunch, and then from the morning, from about 7:30 in the morning, when homeless, drug addicts, jobless start arriving, from 7:30 until about noon, we also have a very secure way to pass out necessities and perishables and non-perishables. So I've been doing that since March.
You say you're the parking lot guy. It gives the impression like somebody's doing a lot of work and they say, here, Joe, go ahead and deliver that to car number 7. It's a bit more complicated than that. You're actually running the show.
Yeah, we've set up a very safe way for our volunteer cooks to stay completely quarantined within a building. And then I am the only person outside. And I've set up a secure way for me to distribute food and for our guests to also get food as well. So everyone's required to wear a mask, which, as you can imagine, has been difficult the last couple of months to get everyone, again, because you have homeless. So we've distributed masks and jobless but people are coming together. It's changing the community as well. So they show up and they know where to stand in line, and they know how to spread apart and treat each other with respect. So it's a pretty impressive thing to see.
You're a pretty impressive thing to see. He's a real human being, that Joseph Anderson. Let's hear for Joseph Anderson. I can hear it. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.
So do you want to have another international call soon so I can, just talk to you, or?
Absolutely.
Or should we do this in 6 months?
Let's do one every month.
Okay. God bless. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Everyone.
Bye.